when you are a spark, when you are a catalyst for positive, dynamic conversation, conflict included, you're going to have more of a voice in every conversation. That's what I think it means to HR like a boss.
Hi, it's John Bernatovich, your host of the HR Like a Boss podcast. I've embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals with the hope of finding what it takes to do HR like a boss. If you like the show, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast. I am super excited to have Jim Smith with me today. I met Jim years ago through the Cleveland SHRM organization. He has such an incredible reputation in our community and is doing some incredible work with leaders in the HR function, and just felt like a natural fit for the HR Like a Boss podcast. Jim, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, John.
How would you describe the purpose of human resources?
Well, I think in a single phrase, I see the primary purpose of HR as the curator of the culture. And I don't even, I'm very careful not to say the keeper of the culture, because I think the culture belongs to everybody. It has to be everybody's responsibility. But the top HR person and the HR department in general have a responsibility for curating, for selecting what comes into that space, what is called culture, for making sure that we're paying attention to some of the markers of culture. In past roles I've had, it was my job to not to define the values of the company, but to drive the creation of them, to get us all in a room together and having some really hard conversations about what was really important to us as an organization. How did we really want to treat people? Where do people sit in relation to profit and all the other things we need to pay attention to as an organization? And so while there are other things that HR does, I mean, HR also attends to the infrastructure of people in an organization, and that's important. But every decision we make about infrastructure is really driven by, well, what is the culture? Like, how do we want people to experience this organization? How do we want customers to experience our people? So everything we build needs to support our capacity for doing what we say we represent.
I'm curious about talking here for a bit, Jim, on connecting your leadership to the human resource function. What are your suggestions? What are you seeing in your years of experience and in your coaching business when someone does that right, maybe when someone isn't as proficient at it, what the impact is?
On a systemic level, I am sometimes saddened, you might say, when I go into an organization and their issue is leadership. I'm often being brought in as a coach to work with people to develop high potential folks or people who've moved into senior leadership roles. And I'll sit down with them and learn that they've been with the company for 25 years and they've had about this much formal training, right? So they're really
listening on the podcast, he's got a goose egg, or he's showing a 0 or something very small and minute.
The little tiny end of my finger, like that much. Everything they know is from watching other people or their own education, but no one's ever given them any kind of formal training in what it really means to be a leader and what it means to be a leader at this company. Earlier I was speaking to the notion that HR is the curator of culture. What's scary is when I go into an organization and the HR person says to me, well, these are our core values and our mission and our purpose. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And then I'm talking to a senior leader in the organization and I say, well, what might your core values tell you here? Or how might your core values guide you in that decision? And they'll be like, I don't know. Do we have core values? You're a CXO. You should know this. So that's a time when I see HR having abandoned their role. Or maybe that's not what that company ever saw them as. But that's on a systemic level, leadership needs to be nurtured. Leadership needs to be developed. Resources have to be given over to helping people learn how to manage others, and as they grow, then eventually lead others. And I'm using those two words very deliberately apart from each other, because first you learn how to manage, right? Command, control, compliance, do performance appraisals, hire, fire. And then you have to learn how to lead, which is think strategically, think across business units, think about, the movement of people across the organization, not just the people in my downstream kind of thing. And organizations that pay attention to that do better.
How would you describe someone that does HR like a boss?
Well, what's a boss, right? The boss is the person who, when they walk into the room, you can feel the atmosphere change, right? If everybody's in a bad mood and the boss walks in with a great energy, the entire conversation shifts, everything elevates. And of course, it can go in the other direction too. But let's talk about the positive side. To HR like a boss means that you believe in the value of what you do. And when you walk into a room, you walk into that room with confidence, with a solid, grounded executive presence, a belief that you belong in that conversation, and that what you believe in, what you're responsible for, is important. The truth in many organizations is that HR is barely evolved from personnel. And so it takes some guts to walk into a room like that, where the organization might not feel that way about you yet. But here's the thing I've learned about executive presence, because this is probably the most powerful thing that I coach around the clients that I work with. An enormous percentage of people in senior leadership roles, especially those who are relatively new to them, often go in and out of imposter syndrome, right? Which is not really a thing, but we use that term anyway. It's this idea that, oh my gosh, I am here, I'm at the table. What if they figure out I don't know everything, right? And so a lot of my work with them is, first of all, working on their thinking, because there's a certain level above which you're not supposed to know everything. And if you're being paid to know everything, we've made a poor choice here, right? Because we've got 20 other people below you who are probably smarter than you. That's not your job. Your job is to create the right environment for all those people to work together and to create clear vision and orchestrate them, right? So I also work with them in their body. How do you wear confidence? Like, what do you put off of you when you walk through the plant or walk around the floor or show up in a Zoom room or Teams meeting with other people? Do you show up and everybody goes, thank God they're here? Or do you show up and everybody suddenly turns off their camera, right? You got to pay attention to that stuff. When you are a spark, when you are a catalyst for positive, dynamic conversation, conflict included, to reference our earlier conversation, you're going to have more of a voice in every conversation. That's what I think it means to HR like a boss.
Jim, that was an awesome episode. I really appreciate your friendship and support of me over the years. And I cannot wait for people to hear this episode. And I wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please leave a rating or review, or better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.